that war in the Middle East is having an impact on British Jews. Ministers say they are extremely concerned over the fact anti-Semitic incidents have tripled since the Hamas invasion of Israel. Absolutely shocking stuff. Joining me to discuss this is Gideon Falter, the Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Antisemitism. Thanks for joining us, Gideon. I live fairly near Golders Green, so I've seen this at first hand. There have been attacks there. Somehow or other, within minutes of this invasion on Saturday, people got onto railway bridges and painted Free Palestine, which was quickly taken down. Big police presence. We're hearing stories of kids being told, don't wear your uniforms on the way to Jewish schools. My question to you, Gideon, is why on earth, given what happened on Saturday and through the weekend, Israel was the victim here. You know, this was an outrageous, grotesque attack by Hamas on an innocent country that was just going about its business. And yet the reaction back in Britain seems to be evil Israel, down with Israel. That's perverted, isn't it? What's wrong with us?
I think a lot of people who have been, on the wrong side of this for a very long time have really started to show their true colours. I mean, if you see something that barbaric and, as you said, grotesque, a terrorist attack like that, targeting children, the elderly, women, men, indiscriminately, and you come out onto the streets and celebrate and let off fireworks and wave flags and clap your hands and go around town beeping your car's horn, that is somebody really showing their true colours. They're showing support for terrorism. They're showing that whoever they are, they have absolutely no affinity with the values of this country. But there are also people who've been on the borders of this a very long time. And what the Jewish community has long said is, look at what these people say, look at what they denounce, and look at what they applaud. And we have a real problem with anti-Semitism in this country and across the world. And a lot of people have just said, oh, no, you Jews are complaining about nothing. This is just some form of, sort of political discourse about Israel. Well, what we're seeing right now is it's not. A lot of these supposed discourses about Israel are actually overt support for terrorism right now. And it's terrifying for British Jews to be walking our streets in our cities where we've lived all of our lives and grown up amongst everybody else, and suddenly seeing people supporting acts of terrorism right after such a horrific terrorist attack.
I agree, and live where I live. The Jewish community there, they're British, they're part of our nation, and they do not deserve this. Might I suggest to you, Gideon, that this situation, this anti-Semitic outbreak, is not being helped by the BBC, the state broadcaster, who bizarrely continues to refuse to classify Hamas as terrorists, as if they're some sort of bold freedom fighters, militant freedom fighters fighting for their cause and their country. It really doesn't help that the BBC has dug its heels in about this. The King has called them terrorists. They call these terror attacks. The Prince of Wales, William, and his wife, Kate, have said the same thing. This nation officially classifies Hamas as a terrorist organisation. So do many other nations around the world. Why on earth will the BBC not do the same?
I think that's something that's actually really starting to cause a lot of concern amongst British Jews, because most countries in the world consider Hamas to be a terrorist organisation. The UK does, the EU does, the United States does. All of the civilised world is united in condemning this barbaric group. They consider them to be just like Islamic State, and I think everybody agrees on that. But for some reason, the BBC and some of the other broadcasters insist on calling them militants, as though people who shoot babies and children point blank in the head are somehow pursuing some kind of militant objective. That's not what it is. It's terrorism. And when you fail to call it terrorism, you are essentially giving a tacit signal to people who support this group that maybe it's not that bad.
Indeed, and the BBC said that to call, or rather John Simpson, their veteran, highly respected, venerable foreign editor, been at the BBC, as I keep saying, since the Jurassic period. He says that to call Hamas terrorists would be to take sides. Now, I know the BBC is almost obsessive about being unbiased. It's not very good at being unbiased, but it's obsessive about pretending to be unbiased. But I would suggest, this is our state broadcaster. We pay for it. It's okay to take sides against people who execute people on their doorsteps, who behead babies, who rape and pillage and, in an utterly unjustified way, commit atrocities. It's okay to take sides against people like that, isn't it?
Well, yes, and the BBC does take sides. I mean, if you take a different issue, let's say, for example, climate change, every time you've got a scientist on the BBC saying that the climate is changing, the BBC doesn't put on somebody else saying that it's not. If people say that, if you have, for example, an activist from Black Lives Matter, the BBC doesn't put on some white supremacist to go on alongside them. And there are two things really here. One is that it's not taking sides to call a terrorist organization a terrorist organization. It's an objective fact. The objective of the organization is the annihilation of Jews worldwide, by the way, not just in Israel, through the means of terrorism. And secondly, I'm very comfortable taking sides against terrorists. I think most people should be. And the BBC has done in the past. They called Daesh a terrorist group. They do call different terrorist groups. But Hamas, for some reason, gets a special pass from the BBC. And that is what is really disturbing for a lot of us British Jews, thinking if we can't call this kind of barbarity terrorism, what is terrorism for the BBC? At what point has a line been crossed that the BBC considers to be objectionable?
Gideon, excellent to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time.